This nation was founded on the principle that all men are created equal.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men
are
created equal.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear.
Created equal.
Welcome to Created Equal from WDET in Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson, and I'm here with Kerry Jr. II. He is the show's producer.
Yeah, and it's funky dance music season.
Funky dance music.
Funky dance music. It's just like a weird, like, banjo-y disco vibe I think of when I hear that. Funky dance
Funky
music.
makes you think of banjo?
I don't know. I just think of funky. I don't know. Maybe I should just think of funk music and leave it at the people who.
Funky is drums and
it is
electronic instruments and stuff like that.
You're absolutely right. I don't know.
But it is time for movement.
It is time
this
for
weekend
movement.
Coming up, Memorial Day. Every year in Detroit, we welcome people from all over the world now, really, to come celebrate techno music here in the city of Detroit. And of course, that's us celebrating ourselves. It's one of the really cool things about it is that techno music is from Detroit in the same way that cars are from Detroit, in the same way that Verner's is from Detroit. This is one of our brands. This is part of us that we have shared with everybody else.
Yeah, just like Fagel was from Detroit.
Yep.
And this festival specifically, we've been hosting since the turn of the century, since like 2000, according to the M Live. They wrote like a brief history about it. And it was originally called the Detroit Electronic Music Detroit Electronic Music Festival.
Yeah.
For some reason, that was a tongue twister for me. Held in Hart Plaza, still is today, and it's just been growing ever since. So, I mean, for me, I knew of techno music, but I didn't know of it being a Detroit music genre until maybe 8 or so years ago.
Yeah.
Did you always know techno music?
So I mean, the Belleville Three, Juan Atkins, Derek May, Kevin Saunderson, they're somewhat contemporaries of mine in age.
Okay.
And so I knew about them before they were, a huge deal. I mean, I can remember this thing happening in Detroit music that was not connected directly to my social circle, but there were people in my social circle who were pretty connected to it. So I did know that there was this thing going on that we were kind of inventing.
What's this funky dance music
Funky
thing that everybody's
dance music,
talking about?
that's right. What is this?
I'm twirling a finger for people who can't see us. I don't know why that makes me think of that. I don't know where my brain is going.
Yeah, so I mean, I knew for a long time that this was part of Detroit and Detroit's music scene. And I do remember the early emergence of, the club scene around this, places like the Shelter and 3 Floors of Fun and other places that no longer exist, many of them, and where you would hear this music, right? Because it wasn't on the radio.
Okay.
And then the festival started,
Okay.
and that made it a bigger deal, and I think gave it an international stage.
Yeah.
This is if you go to Europe, a lot of people there think of Detroit as the home of electronic music. That's what they think we do.
That's so funny to me, though, because as someone from Detroit, at least before I returned, I was always thinking of techno as a European genre.
Right.
I would always hear it associated with like the Netherlands or Germany. Like if I were to Google techno festivals, there's so many going on in Europe that I assumed it was a European genre of music.
Yeah.
So I was just ignorant of it.
Well, it is. I mean, they certainly have created a lot that adds to the foundation that came from here. And, there's some people who think that they've taken too much of it and kind of claimed it as their own. But I think that's always a strange argument when you talk about art. Art belongs to everyone, and everybody usually contributes to the forms in a way that grows them and changes them. What's cool about the festival now is that the European presence at it is pretty big. I mean, they come here for the festival because they know this is where all of this comes from.
It is really an electronic music festival for all dance music, house, techno,
that's
EDM, like all time. And then there's even like hip hop acts too there.
Yeah.
So they allow a lot of influences to flow into the spirit of what this festival has become. But yeah, right. It originated here. It was popularized by the Black and LGBTQ community here. Very created equal of you to speak to the origins here and how it's been, how some people, I think, say that it's kind of been adopted, commercialized, whitewashed, I would say is another term I've heard before too. But I think our goal for this episode is to kind of go back to those origins.
To really look at where this is from and at that time, especially here in Detroit, the 90s were a really kind of conflicted decade for Detroit, I always feel. In many ways, it was the worst decade in the city's history if you look at like economic indicators and population loss and all of those kind of things. But there was also this incredible creative class that comes together largely around this music that is Black, that is queer or gay or whatever term you might want to use to describe, sexual and gender identity, that defines the city in a way. And there was a feeling being in the city in the 90s that was really shaped by this music and that culture. And I can remember that really clearly. That part is really prominent in my memories of being a young person in my 20s in Detroit. And I didn't spend most of the 90s here. I was gone for most of it. But the time that I was, this was a big part of the culture. And so we want to talk to two people who were a part of that. Adriel Thornton, who is a DJ and a creator and just a real Renaissance man in many ways, but was a big part of the scene then and the club scene then, and is, of course, now still really involved with techno. We want to talk with him about what was happening when this music was coming together and the scene was embracing it. And then Stacey Hotwaxx Hale, which is a name that anybody who really loves Detroit music is familiar with. She's more on the house side of things, and that's earlier, right? That's in the 70s and 80s. But that also has a huge influence over the emergence of this kind of music.
Yeah, she's widely considered the godmother of house music.
She is. So what was it that attracted you to house? And then also tell me how you distinguish house from techno or hip hop.
So I think, again, playing early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and playing what was called dance music.
Right.
And I don't know, you know the song Quartz Beyond the Clouds?
I don't think so.
You know the song Foxy Get Off?
Yes. I do
What kind
know
of music would you call that?
Funk? Would you?
I don't know. That's back to, again,
Yeah,
I'm playing it and I'm not giving it a title.
That's old.
But it's progressive, and now,
Right.
so this is the time. I'm just saying I was playing just a little bit before.
What year? So what year is that?
I just told you. Don't ask me
Can't
what year.
tell you.
You have to Google that. Because I just don't remember years.
Because it seems to me like funk comes first.
Yes. Funk is first. Yes, that I agree.
And then out of that grows hip hop, house, and somewhat techno. Seems to me like it has a different path, but house and hip hop seem to me to come out of funk. Is that wrong?
Let me think about that. Again, I can only.
So what was it?
I can only reference my memory of what
Yeah.
I knew as music,
Right.
before I was giving it titles. So I'm gonna take it all the way back
Okay.
to the '60s.
Okay.
I was just a baby, but my brothers are 10 years older than me, and they're playing music.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just like, whatever it is, it's going. But in that time, I was introduced to rock, fusion, jazz, R&B, top 40. So now a combination of all these things kind of coming together, putting it to a rhythmic beat that's repetitive is how I believe disco was coming out. You
Absolutely,
think
it
of
was
George
disco
Amarato
comes from,
and
right.
Donna Summers and all that. So
Yeah.
all this is, but with it still being progressive, but kind of electronically, that was really kind of house.
Okay.
You think about, with the
Yeah.
repeated rhythms and
Uh-huh.
stuff, that's a little kind of house. So now,
Is that what attracted you to it?
no, I just
Was
like the way it
the-
sounded.
you
There
just
wasn't
like the way
nobody
it
else
sounded.
playing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't being played on it wasn't in regular rotation
Right.
on any of the radio stations.
Yeah.
You'd have to go to the clubs in Detroit to hear
Right.
this music.
Right.
And so again,
House and techno, right?
we ain't got to techno yet.
Well, okay, techno's not there yet, right? House
No,
is first.
remember we're in the city.
Right.
This is we ain't
This
got
is
there because-
before.
Right. So I'm going to tell you how it developed.
Yeah.
And just because I was watching and I was with the people that were doing it.
Right.
And so, as I talked about progressive beats repeating themselves, and then they would make some of the songs that would take the vocal. I'm going to ask you about another song. Do you know this song, This Time, Baby, by Jackie Moore?
I don't think so.
Okay. It's definitely progressive. You know that song, God Made Me Funky?
Yes, I do know that song.
It's a straight rip. The loop is straight off of that song.
Okay. Yep.
And so you see how the growth of that. And so Jesse Saunders came up with the idea. He said, let me just lay these tracks down, just a track. Just a repetitive track. Do, 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 do. I got hold of the copy. I'm like, oh my God. I looked at it like, oh, here's a song I can play the transition to get to the next one in case this song ain't got enough intro on it.
Right.
That's, oh, this is like, and I was just in heaven because I had a track that let me mix the other records.
Right. And
I'd have no problem if you got skills. Go to this one, go back to this, to let you be able to do these things. That was the first house record. But I didn't know. I don't think he knew either.
You just liked it.
Well, it was progressive.
Yeah.
We called it progressive. But it's actually the very first house music song made that could legitimately say that it was house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Techno was not out yet. This is why I say that, because I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even with, I won in 1985, okay? So now and the reason I know this date is because I won a contest on WJLB, submitted a mix, competed against 600 DJs, and I took first place.
Wow.
and played it at the Fox. Mojo was at WJLB at that time, and the mothership came down and picked us up. It was a great big old thing to do.
Yeah.
And inside of that, I remember the songs I played, Martin Circus, some of the songs, Martin Circus, a little bit of Madonna, Watch We Walk, Let the Music Play.
Mm-hmm.
All these weren't called house, but I used the transition to get to some of those songs with that On and On track by Jesse Saunders, which is out of Chicago.
Yeah.
Now, later on, I learned, you know who Colonel Abrams is?
No.
Colonel Abrams is a native Detroiter. He'd go to Chicago. He ended up living in New York, but you may know some of his songs. But him and Jesse were working on music together. However, and typically, you know how folks working and they fall out.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember very clearly. So then he released a song called "Music Is the Answer." He was a great vocal. Rest in peace too. But a great vocalist. He could quite a few house tune hits how male vocalists singing. So you Google him, Colonel Abrams. He's signed to a major label, MCA. But before that, he got signed to Streetwise Records. And it's the same track that do 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 do. Now, mind you, I don't know
Right.
that they were together.
Right.
I just know there's two separate things. But I do know this is a great mix. It was the exact same beat. They created that beat together.
Yeah.
So Colonel took it and put vocals to it and went and produced it in New York. And Jesse released it in Chicago. But Colonel's from Detroit.
Hi, it's Terry Gross, the host of Fresh Air. We bring you in-depth, long-form interviews with actors, directors, musicians, authors, journalists, and more. Listen to our Peabody Award-winning Fresh Air podcast from WHYY and NPR.
So who created house music?
See, that was a clever way to get to that.
This happened, and I can't make this up.
So you say that we created it, then, right?
That happened.
Yeah.
It's no question, hands down. I was there. I seen it. I heard it and watched all that. So in the meantime, that's not saying techno wasn't brewing in the background, because it was. And while I'm playing stuff like this here, my compadres that were creating techno, not really knowing that's what they were creating, would ask me to come and listen. And so I would. I'm like, what is this song? And I remember the first time I heard Strings of Life before it was even anybody knew anything.
Yeah.
And why that stays in my memory is because he did it on a Yamaha 100, and I have to go get one. And I went and bought that piano because I heard Strings of Life played on that.
Yeah.
We don't know nothing about a word techno yet, okay? But I said, I don't know what that is, but it's beautiful. Yeah. That was my comment
to
them, that I thought, it was great.
Yeah.
And so, between Jesse coming up with, he was doing it in Chicago in the house music, and then, everybody that caught on and they were doing it, and then you got Fast Eddie.
So you say the house started in Detroit.
You know that you ever heard the song Aretha Franklin? She said, "This is the house that Jack built."
Yeah.
Now she said that way before both of us. Now, can't deny it.
Yeah.
Can't deny it. It's just the truth.
So let's talk about the scene though that goes along with this, right? Mm-hmm. As you say, look, this was not played on radio for the most part.
Right.
It's played in clubs.
Right.
Those clubs were also important.
Yes, they were very important. So, the type of music I was playing was our primary. Well, I played in all clubs, but I played in gay clubs, and they would call it gay music.
Yeah.
So, you can't play that. That's gay music. And I couldn't figure out the life of me how music got gay. I don't know, and I still won't know to this day.
Well, and it's interesting that was the word then.
Yeah.
What would that word be? What would that word be now? I mean, all this has changed so much.
Yeah, it has. It's changed dramatically.
But they were saying gay music as in that's bad.
Because it wasn't played on the radio.
I see.
So we were labeled that we were playing gay music.
Yeah.
Because it was progressive, because it was house,
yeah.
Because it wasn't what everybody else was doing.
Yeah. Okay. And that reflected also the culture and the identity that so many people...
It did, because the leaders of it, and then the producers and the people that were playing, and who we looked up to was Ken Collier, who was our master here in Detroit, Frankie Knuckles, who was the master in Chicago. They were friends. They would always see each other and do things. Derek May actually gave Frankie Knuckles his first drum machine, whatever instrument, but he gave him something to use for production. But yeah, that's what it was. And I can remember being in radio, so when the techno was coming out, and I'm still playing on the radio, and I got radio shows, I just sneaked the techno in because I was bad enough to be getting the house music in, and I would re-edit it and do something, but I would sneak it in. I'd do it so fancy where they wouldn't know, because it had to be pre-recorded.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember that very well, doing that.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue talking with Stacey Hotwaxx Hale about the origins of house music here in the city of Detroit. We're back with Created Equal from WDET in Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson, and I'm talking with Stacey Hotwaxx Hale, a DJ who was one of the original discoverers of house music here in the city of Detroit. So So let's talk about this title that you carry, the godmother of house music. Do you like that? Do you accept that?
It took me a minute to accept it. It really did.
Why? It's certainly meant in a flattering way.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But godmother, two things happened. I needed a T-shirt to put out because people were selling the T-shirts, and I was like, I need a T-shirt too, something I claiming. And I said, okay, well, we're going to do a T-shirt, and we're going to put the godmother on there, with the logo, all of that. And a picture of me that I took at Cheeks, which is, it really is a cool picture. So coming from the 80s in that picture, and I was actually dressed in a leather thing and had this thing. It was, to look at it today, it is very modern godmother-ish. This is the best I could, It's all over everywhere so you can see it. But I remember getting this leather coat at Hudson's. I had an African scarf that I was wearing around, and I had on sunglasses, and I'm doing this. So it seemed real appropriate for the T-shirt and the godmother with the clown. And my favorite movie is The Godfather. All three of them. I mean, like I watch all of them just like I'd never seen them before. But I really, really enjoy Coppola's thing doing that. It's a lot of the family love and all that. It's just, I know it was gangster too, but I watched that like I'd never seen it before. I have copies. I have the CDs, DVDs, all of that. So that was a bit of me accepting it to be able to have a shirt to say that.
Right.
So I did the shirt, and there was the picture of me, and people walk around in it. And did some variations of it because they would, this world, hey, Godfather, reading it. And it's right there.
It's godmother.
But it says godmother on their biggest day, and I go, okay. And then they don't even realize it's me. So I reversed it and put my name to the top and put the logo on the bottom. And it's like, okay. So that was a bit of accepting it. And what was the other one? Was two things that happened. Oh, when the person that came up to me and told me who started calling me that, Sierra Donovan. So I was at the Charivari, and I'm sitting there selling the T-shirts at the table, and she told the story, how it came up, and it just caught on, and then off it went. I didn't do it. I don't know. Hi, my name is Godmother of House. Right. What?
But what does it mean to you when you hear it, if you say it?
I embrace it now more than ever. I realize that I have wisdom, and that's because things I've done, I've already done them. It's already happened, and so I have the wisdom and I have the knowledge, and so I can tell the story. So that allows me to earn that title.
Yeah.
I'm happy that I can still tell the stories of just somewhat like what I told you. I'm happy I can talk about Ken Collier, who was the master, who was the spearhead of everything that you know that happened in Detroit by way of playing progressive mixed dance music. From the very moment he came out, he was the very first person I saw. I like engineering and electronics, but when I first heard him mix, and I was already there in my head, but I had never seen it. And I walked up and I heard the music mix, and I just went up there and looked and saw two turntables in the mixer. It was on and popping right then. And I was like, okay. And then I went to him and asked him, was there a woman in town that holds this down? Like he said, no, Miss Stacey. And I said, I'm going to be that girl.
Yeah.
And I never stopped.
That's an important turn too, right? that there weren't a lot of women.
Great thought. Women, there were always women DJs. Okay, let's not.
Right. You were mentioning before Rosetta Hines, who was on the air in the 70s, right?
Exactly. And on. So there were women DJs, but we know them most as announcers. And so those that were in clubs, they were playing songs but still being announcers because that was the way. That was just the way. You know, they didn't know any different. I got discovered by Duncan Sound. You ever heard of that? Quick story. I'm trying to do it real fast. Duncan Sound was a carpenter who built speakers and had turntables and would put all these things together. and he had contracts in the major clubs around the city. And they would rent the equipment from him. He would put the equipment in, and he have a staff of DJs. And then he would employ us, and we'd go in and play the music for these clubs. And he would rotate us, so we'd all get a turn to play in the different clubs. And imagine wasn't black clubs and playing music. And so I was at Club Exclusive playing and mixing, and word was getting out around the city. It's this girl, this dude, And so again, I don't know that I'm unusual. I didn't know. And Kevin McAllister came in as he heard, and he said, "I want you to come over here to Duncan Sound and audition." I'm like, "Audition? Oh, okay." I didn't know no better. And I went in, and it was the first time I saw quartz lock turntables. I didn't know how to unlock them. I had never seen them before in my life. And so I was trying to mix, and the pitch wouldn't move because I didn't know how to unlock. I'd never seen it. I'm too scared to ask, "How do you work this?" So I think I'm supposed to be knowing what I'm doing. And they left me up alone in the front. It was all guys in the back, but they could hear me. They couldn't see me, but they could hear me. And they come running up there talking about, "Man, that's what I'm talking about. That's what they do in New York." I don't know nothing about it. I'd never been to New York. I know nothing about it. So that's how I got introduced to the city.
Yeah.
And there were 2 women working at the organization at that time, but they weren't mixing. They were playing, but they weren't mixing. It's they were playing like typically what you hear on radio. So I come in there slamming. They both quit.
Oh no!
That hurt my feelings. I'm going like, "Wait, don't do that. To come right. We could make something great." But they don't want. Everybody don't want to do because it takes work. It's just now you can just push a button and say, "Hey, look at each other and mix." But playing records like that, it takes work and it takes practice. It takes another skill.
We need to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation about the origins of techno and house. Adriel Thornton will join us. He is a culture creator here in the city of Detroit, someone who has been hosting parties around the scene of techno music for about 30 years. Stay where you are. We'll be right back. More Created Equal. We're back with more Created Equal from WDET in Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson. If you grew up here in the 80s and 90s and had anything to do with the techno scene, you know the name Adriel Thornton. This was the guy who would find any space at all in the city to throw parties and host events that were convened around the idea of this emerging music and the cultural scene that was emerging with it. It was a black scene, it was a gay scene, a queer scene. It was different, and a lot of people found really safe space in the things and the places that Adriel was able to create for. So let's go back 30 years. There is no electronic movement festival or event really in Detroit. Talk about how different it was then, and I guess how hard it was to get all this started.
Right. I think Detroit had a really interesting and robust club and rave scene, like a party scene. I was a rave promoter and a club promoter. I think that, obviously it was much smaller. Yeah. Right? The people who were participating in it, the amount of people, it was much smaller. And in a weird kind of way, much more authentic, right? But that's not to say that anything, growth is not bad. Yeah. Right. But you had to find it, right? And it was, I remember, having to explain to people, you know, still, even then, like what techno was, or like what this music was, or like what real... back then, people really, I think, had... and when I say people, I'm saying like more mainstream folks or whatever, had, you know, their idea of what... When we talked about going to the club or to the party or whatever, to them they equated to, okay, they're going to the bar.
Right.
Right? Which is... right?
Which is not what you meant.
Right, exactly. Not what I meant. And so it's hard for them to really wrap their heads around the difference between the two, right?
I mean, it is hard to explain, I think, to a lot of folks what Detroit in the 90s was like for music, for culture, and for this kind of emerging culture that is now very widely understood, but it was different back then. It kind of stood alone.
Yeah, it stood alone. It was, you know, I'll tell you something. Culturally, Detroit in the 90s was our playground.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so is, you know, when you look at it from, you know, like today's standards, is, you know, those empty buildings and things were, to us, they weren't really signs of decay. And it's hard to say that, right? They weren't signs of decay and neglect. It's what I saw, you know, all we wanted to do at the train station was throw a party out of it. Like throw like a massive event there. You know, it's so funny to go to some of these buildings downtown, and I swear I'll be talking with you know, maybe some work colleagues or something like that, and say, oh yeah, I threw a party here, and like, and now it's some fancy, it's really hot restaurant, right? Yeah. So we didn't have that though back then, right? It was, you know, when I remember the first festival we went to, the first DEMF we went to, us, the whole crew and everybody was working, where did like an after, on that Tuesday, tried to go to breakfast, and the hottest place was Anita Baker's IHOP.
Yeah, right.
And we got there and it was like, they didn't have eggs, they didn't have milk. The festival had blown them out. But that was it. There was no, I mean, there were a few other options, but you really couldn't, there wasn't
other places to go.
Right. There was I think we started, there wasn't a Starbucks, and then the second year there was. No, I'm sorry, that Starbucks was there on Congress.
Okay.
It had just opened. Everybody was super excited because Detroit had gotten a Starbucks. Yeah. But then they were closed during the weekend, and we told them, we begged them to open up next year. I was like, all of us need a coffee. Right? So it's, you know, navigating that. So I think the nightlife aspect of it was it was just so much more fun to me, right? And I think that, you know, obviously, you know, I was a little younger then, but
we were all a little younger then, right?
But it was fun and it was funky, and I think it was really, we were exploring a lot of different ways of doing things.
Yes.
And musically, they were exploring a lot of different things.
And I think you can't talk about the music, which was kind of finding its place and expanding and growing, but also the culture itself and the other parts of that culture that were pushed out or ostracized at the time.
There were, you know, and I'm glad you said that, because, you know, my contribution to all of this has been as an event producer, right? As a promoter, that's been the art of what I've done to this thing. So creating those spaces, right? And we oftentimes, when we talk about, especially in electronic music, we talk a lot about the DJs, the producers, and this is no disrespect to them, but the space, the people who were going to those places, right? The crowd, you know, was really what made this thing special. And then what carried, it kind of, you know, all of these people became advocates for the music and for the sound. And having a place to congregate and to share that music, you know, again, like going to, I hate to keep referring to it as the mainstream, but this was really underground back then, right? So, you know, you couldn't, you know, talk about this crazy abstract thing that, you know, Green Velvet just made, or, you know, that Derek had put out, or anything like that, to your average person, because they didn't know.
They wouldn't know.
They had no clue about it. So being able to have these spaces where you could, you know, it sounds just so general, but like that, be around like-minded people, was really, I think, really important, and really really gave home to a lot of people, and there's a lot of different reasons.
I mean, and there's again, there's the music, there's the art, there's also the identity.
Yeah,
that went along with all of that.
Yeah.
That was not mainstream at all in the '90s, but in Detroit, because as you point out, it felt a lot of the time in the '90s like everyone just got up and left, right? And we were still here, and there was these things, these spaces that you could go to and do things that you couldn't have done before,
right?
But it gave space to all kinds of people who didn't feel like they had space before.
100%. If you think about a place like Heaven, right, which was Black gay after hours at 7 and Woodward. I made this joke, that Forever Church is the Forever Church construction. That build is
go get it done someday.
Right, someday, God willing.
Don't make fun.
I know. But that was helmed by the late great Ken Collier, who was the godfather of house in Detroit, just hands down. No one's going to argue that. And it was a teacher to quite a few other DJs. But the space that was created was I think one of the most liberating places you could ever go. And people who went there, especially the queer community, who were in the '90s, were still battling real safety issues.
Yeah. There was an epidemic.
Yeah, there was
not recognized as that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Right. They were still fighting, the AIDS epidemic, right, and still a part of it, and still being impacted by it, huge, like in a really big way. So you're dealing with people who were dealing with loss a lot of times, right? People you knew, were probably, there were quite a few who probably weren't here next week or right then, So you're dealing with that. You were dealing with ostracizing that comes along with it. And here's the space where you could just come in and you could leave all of that at the door, right? And come in and, create, you could be part of this community who understood it, but you didn't necessarily need to talk about it. Unless you wanted to, right? But people just got it, right? But the thing is that, I think people could also create personas to who they were. You could come in and be something completely different. And it gave people, I think, that real mental and emotional break that they needed in order to cope with real life. This magic is only going to last for a few hours, right? So I think those spaces were really important and literally probably saved some people's lives, by being able to go and be part of a community. It's I don't think that can be understated.
Yeah.
And
so it's hard for me to think of movement or techno without the association with the culture and with the identity, right? Do you think that's still true now? I mean, when I think of the '90s, that's how I think of it. Is movement still reflective
of which culture? Of queer culture,
or the idea of that openness to culture?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah,
right. It's I think
it's more commercial.
It's more, I was going to say,
right?
it's more.
It's bigger. It's more commercial.
Yeah, and I think
it's more mainstream.
Yeah.
So that automatically alters the picture some. Right?
Thank you. Right. Yeah. But in a weird, so in its way, yes. But it's kind of like in a freak show kind of maybe going to Vegas kind of way. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're gonna wear some fuzzy boots and we're gonna do, and it's almost like it is in a. I hate to say it, but I think that it's just in a sort of cliche way, or in a Yeah, and definitely not authentic, right?
Really?
Well, and I say that because, so we're in there's the mainstreaming of it, I think, has in a weird kind of way, from a scene or a crowd standpoint, really sort of taken away the necessity of being really different, right? I think who it attracts is different. Right? I'll say this. There's difference between the regulars at those places.
Right.
All right.
Right.
And, and then the people who are just kind of passively going. Yeah. You could take us back to club world for a second, of the party scene. Another thing that's changed really between 30 years ago and now, even though we see sort of a resurgence of this, right? But, there was a real physical threat to things, right? The whole point is that, again, this was stuff that was... It was underground, and there was a sense of danger to it because quite frankly, there was. You could maybe go to jail that night, and then really thinking about some of the places that we did parties in, I am happy to be here.
They weren't safe.
Right. I'm really happy to be here right
They were
now.
fun, but they were not safe.
Right.
Yeah.
But, again, it's parallels to, back to the sort of danger element of it.
Well, I mean, it was just... the city was losing so much in that decade. I feel like that was the worst decade of existence for the city of Detroit. Like all the people that left, all the businesses that left, all the buildings that went empty, the homes that went abandoned, and then you had this kind of fun outlet, really, that just was emerging, right? And that hadn't existed before. That could find its space in the emptiness.
I think that's really important, and I think that is actually an important piece of the story. I think that specifically Detroit's rave and techno culture probably could not have existed the same way, at least in a healthy, functioning city. What was able to the magic the thing that was able to create it. I don't know anyone who actually broke into a warehouse, right, to do a party, right? Yeah. You just had to come up with a creative story to get it rented, right? But it's I did a lot of video shoots. I'll tell you, right? We did a video shoot.
That's right.
But the thing is that the reason you could, we didn't have to break into empty warehouse, something like that, was these people were dying to have somebody rent it, even just for a night,
just to occupy,
it. The auxiliary businesses that while others were leaving the city, we just started to turn into an industry, right? Mm-hmm. So you had record labels. I worked at Transmap with Laura Gavor for a hot minute, over in Eastern Market. It was a lot like small little loft space, but this is what was happening. Kevin, Kevin Saunderson. Yeah, I was trying to say, should I explain his whole name? Yeah. Kevin was the only business I knew that he had his offices, the KMS offices were in the Book Cadillac before it closed, right? There were a couple of other businesses.
Before it closed.
Right before it closed. Right, yeah. So, these were still businesses, right? The labels and stuff like that. And then, the parties, again, helped sustain that industry. I had a clothing store below Zoot's Coffee Shop. If you remember where Zoot's Coffee Shop was. I was able to open up a sort of rave clothing store. It was called Space 19. There was, we had our own clothing line called Digital Laundry. But, you had brands like Daniel Pooh, whoever. Now you've got these, now you've got clothing lines and T-shirt lines. Yeah. And these were all dedicated to, it was really just rave culture, right? Mm-hmm. You had magazines. I sold Herb Magazine and Accelerator Magazine. And then I sold people's mixtapes. And it was it was really a store based on rave culture. But, I opened it up in the basement, downstairs unit of Zoot's Coffee Shop, and I was paying $75 a month for rent.
Wow.
It's, you can't, where else?
Right.
Where
else in the world could that have happened?
Yeah, and so other cities, this is not, other cities you can do something similar, but you're going to be paying a whole lot more money. Your startup capital has to be a lot greater. And here, Detroit it was so easy to get from point A to point B. You know, it really was, and I think still is in some extent. But that was also magical, right? Like, I mean, I was a kid, and I just decided to open up a store and could,
and you could do it,
just
right?
You know what I'm saying? And you did, you know. And so it was. When I think about it, it's like that was hot, but it was also bananas. Like where else could you do that?
Why is this happening?
Right? Yeah. So, but I was able to do that. You know, that store became. A lot of people know it as the Checkpoint.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because it was a space that we had.
Yeah.
That when I say we, it was like that we had.
Yeah.
And you know, so on a Friday or Saturday night, you know, you showed up there to get the tickets.
Yeah.
For the party, right? Or the map or whatever, right? So you know, just having. You know, having that kind I just really got warm and fuzzy inside, to be honest with you. Well, because that was, you know, it was such a fun and creative and interesting time. And like you said, it's, again, like I don't necessarily think that people, it's hard, I don't know if I'll ever be able to explain how the club was home or how the party was home to so many people. You know, it was for me. I lived for those days. You know, and it was where you saw so many of your family members, right? Chosen family members. You know, and it was I am friends with people to this day that I met in front of a speaker.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
So it's it really is. I think the impact that it has on again, folks, is you know, and again, I know people really. I'm not going to get into some other stories, but who being able to get to the party or the club was literally prevented them from doing something to themselves at night.
Right.
You know, and just like, okay, if I could just get there and like, you know, and then they get to have something for a minute and chat with somebody and stuff. And I legit know several people who saved their lives.
Yeah.
Right? It probably has saved mine, to be honest with you. So, because, you know, it's you feel so siloed in this crazy world in a lot of different ways that, again, it is congregating with people, and it's that connection, I think, that really, again, helps you.
Yeah, yeah. So you ready to get to movement and dance funky over the weekend?
There was a time in my life where I feel like movement would have been the place to go. I think that time has passed. It seems like a lot of energy. I do enjoy the music, but in doses.
No? That's too much for you?
It's a lot. It goes on for very long. But I did enjoy the conversations we had with Stacey and with Adriel. I did not expect Stacey to get us in trouble with the Chicago folks over there. I don't want any beef with Chicago.
They're claiming house and it's not theirs.
Yeah, she's like,
that's what she says.
You know, so I mean, both of those genres of music, I think, have a deep history here.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenal part of our history, and I feel like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, it will be seen alongside things like in the invention of the assembly line for autos or some of the other really great things that Detroit created, Motown, right, and gave to the world. I think it's just a little early. This is really only 30 years ago that all of this started.
So young.
And it's hard I think it's hard when you're living through it to really understand how big a deal it is. But I think the origins of this music will be one of the pillars of Detroit history in the future.
Yeah. I feel like that sentiment was also captured by some of the things that Stacey and Adriel had to say because they lived through it. At the same time, it felt like they were just telling stories, right? Like we as spectators are looking like, wow, this was a big deal. It was a big deal then, but it is like seen as such a major deal now. But for them, it was like, this is the way we're going to have fun. This is the way we're going to express ourselves.
Right.
So that's
no, it was just fun. I mean, it was fun.
It was fun. Reminiscent, Stephen?
A little bit. That'll do it for us on Created Equal. Be sure to listen to our recent episodes at WDET.org, and we would love if you would subscribe to our podcast, where you can leave us a rating or a review. Created Equal is produced by Carrie Jr. II and David Lines. Our audio editing is done by Connor Anderson, and the music is by Sam Bobian. Created Equal is a production of WDET, the listener-supported service of Wayne State University.